Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Dong-Sun Lee. I run Korea University's Peace and Democracy Institute. I welcome you all, and great to be with you all here today. Many people have been sort of working very hard to prepare for today's event. And first of all, the Republic of Korea's Ministry of Reunification provided very generous financial support to make this event happen, take place. And our American partners at Center for Strategic International Studies, including my best friend, Dr. Seth Johns, actually did a wonderful job in sort of arranging the venue and then providing administrative support. And Korean staff, our staff at the Peace and Democracy Institute did also work very hard to plan this event and then sort of put all things together. And I thank you all. But however, I thank all your participants the most. You will be the persons who will make this event a great success, I believe. I hope you share your knowledge and wisdom freely so that we can come up with great ideas about how we go about sort of meeting the challenges that our two nations face together, and then boost support, increasing cooperation among ourselves. Okay, again, thank you very much. And with such high expectations, I declare we open Korea Global Forum in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Center for Strategic International Studies. I am pleased, very pleased, to host this in coordination with my classmate at the University of Chicago, Dong-Sun Lee, where we went to graduate school together and had fond memories of taking mathematics for political science and strategic studies. So it is a great honor based on that wonderful history and the joint activity now we are participating in. We're thrilled to welcome everyone here to Washington, D.C. for this timely and important conference that will cover the future of U.S. policy towards North Korea, fostering a sustainable path, among other things, to North Korean denuclearization and advancing U.S.-South Korean cooperation on North Korean human rights, among a range of other issues. I wanted to say thanks to a range of individuals for being here. Special thanks to our speakers, to moderators, discussants. A particular thanks to the Republic of Korea Ministry of Unification, to Ambassador Turner, the U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea Human Rights, Ambassador Lee Shin-hwa, Ambassador for International Cooperation on North Korean Human Rights, Korea University, Peace and Democracy Institute, particularly Professor Dong-Sun Lee, Sung-Yoon Kim, and Sung-Jun Park, our CSIS AV and conferencing team, which always do a wonderful job, and for CSIS's nuclear program, particular thanks to Heather Williams, to Joseph Rogers, and to Chase Harward for their great work in doing this and helping put this together in this fantastic venue we have here. I also wanted to give a few housekeeping notes before we start. These are safety precautions. I don't think we'll need them. I don't see. I don't foresee any major need, but we always are responsible safety officers here. Please follow my instructions should the needs arise, and take a moment to familiarize yourself with the exit signs here and with the emergency exit pathways. And we've got a way out here, and then we've got ways out on both sides of me right here. Now we will turn to our program, and I will hand the floor over for remarks by Kim Jong-ho, Minister of Unification, to be read by the Special Advisor to the Minister of Unification. So thank you very much for your partnership, and we look forward to your remarks.
Moi, je parle français un peu couramment, mais my English is not good. I can read slowly. Je m'excuse. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Ko Yong-wan, Special Advisor to the Minister of Unification. I would like to congratulate you on the US seminar of the Korean Global Forum. I will read the keynote speech on behalf of the Minister of Unification. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Dr. Seth Jones, the Senior Vice President at CSIS, Ms. Roberta Cohen, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights, and Professor Kim Sang-woo, and Ambassador for International Cooperation on North Korea Human Rights, Lee Shin-hwa, who have traveled all the way from Korea. I would like to thank all of you, both from Korea and the United States, for being here despite your busy schedule. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the ROK-US alliance, as well as the 70th year since the signing of the Korean War Armistice Agreement. As various events are being held to commemorate this year, we are holding in the Korean Global Forum in Washington today to discuss solutions to the North Korean problem and the cooperation between the United States and Korea. The ROK-US alliance is one of the longest and most successful alliances in the Asia-Pacific region. Given the absence of multilateral security cooperation organizations like NATO in Asia, the ROK-US alliance plays a key role in securing peace and security in the region. The special alliance between the ROK of the United States has continued to grow amidst instability and uncertainty in the international order. The alliance has developed as a value alliance not only for the sake of both countries, but also for the peace, prosperity, and development of Korean Peninsula and of the world. Based on the ironclad alliance, the United States worked together with us on various issues, including the denuclearization of North Korea and improving human rights situation in the North. I would like to use this opportunity to extend my deepest appreciation to our US counterparts and look forward to the continued development of our alliance. The North Korean nuclear issue still remains unsolved for over 30 years. The North Korean regime publicly claims that it has no other choice but to pulse its nuclear and missile programs out of self-defense against the hostile policy of the United States and the Republic of Korea. Yet such ambition would only threaten the safety of the regime itself and create a security dilemma of its own. North Korea is taking advantage of the current international turmoil and factional divisions. The North is strengthening its tie with China and Russia in order to disrupt the international coordination system for North Korea's denuclearization. The ROK government's stance is clear that we do not desire to alter status quo through force. Yet we are committed to achieving denuclearization of North Korea as well as to create peace and prosperity in the Korean Peninsula through dialogue and cooperation. At the Camp David's US-Japan-Korea Trilateral Summit in August, 3 leaders agreed to work toward the complete denuclearization of North Korea. If North Korea makes a wrong decision, we will immediately and decisively deter North Korea through trilateral security cooperation. We made it clear to North Korea that its nuclear and missile threats and provocations achieve nothing. We need to create a strategic environment where North Korea has no choice but to return to denuclearization negotiations. I have no doubt that if we continue to pressure and sanction North Korea with the unilateral action of the international community with each solid international coordination system, North Korea will have no other option but to change. The ROK government already proposed an audacious initiative to resolve North Korea's nuclear issue. The audacious initiative aims to create denuclearized, peaceful and prosperous Korean Peninsula through simultaneous and phased economic, political, and military-related corresponding measures from ROK in line with North Korea's action for denuclearization. I strongly urge North Korea to answer to our proposal for the audacious initiative. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we may all agree, human rights is a universal value and the North Korean people are no exception. The United States government has imposed unilateral sanctions on individuals and organizations violating human rights of North Korean residents. The United Nations Human Rights Council has strongly condemned grave and continuing human rights violations in North Korea. The United States has been working on all fronts to improve human rights situation in North Korea. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, through its annual report, proposed that the State Department should designate North Korea as one of countries of particular concern. I would like to express my deepest appreciation to the U.S. government and its people. The Republic of Korea is now determined to take the lead in efforts to promote human rights in North Korea. The Yoon administration sees human rights as an issue of equal importance as the North Korean nuclear problem and has made various efforts to this end. The ROK government has published its first annual report on human rights in North Korea, returning as a sponsor of the UN resolution on North Korean human rights and appointing an ambassador at large for North Korean human rights. The government is committed to plan and execute various actions with the international community for the betterment of the North Korean people. Recently, a number of North Korean residents, including North Korean defectors, were repatriated back to North Korea from 3 northeastern provinces of China. I would like to use this opportunity to reiterate its ROK government's stance that no defectors should be forcibly repatriated to North Korea without their free will, and the Republic of Korea will accommodate all defectors who wishes to come to Republic of Korea. I strongly urge to Chinese government for its coordination so that North Korean defectors in China can be protected of its human rights based on the international norm and be able to travel to the country that they desire. I believe that the solidarity and cooperation of the international community will be of great help in resolving these issues. I hope that our various efforts will lead to results that sufficiently advance the human rights of the people of North Korea. I would like to ask for your continued interest and support. Ladies and gentlemen, 78 years has passed since Korea's unfortunate division in 1945. The problems on North Korean peninsula have their origins in the division. Therefore, the fundamental resolution to the Korean peninsula's problem can only be accomplished when 2 Koreas move beyond the division to the unification. Article 4 of the Constitution of the Republic of Korea states that the Republic of Korea shall seek unification and shall formulate and carry out a policy of peaceful unification based on the basic free and democracy order. A peacefully unified Korean peninsula based on their free and democracy order will contribute significantly to the peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia and the world. The Republic of Korea government urges all countries sharing common values of liberal democracy for their solidarity and cooperation to support unification of Korean peninsula. The latest trilateral summit at the Camp David was meaningful as the leaders of the 3 states declared that support for the vision of a unified Korean peninsula that is free and at peace. I have no doubt that the US and the international community will also support our vision for peaceful unification based on the freedom. Today, the North Korean government is hoping to build international consensus around its vision of a free, peaceful, and unified Korean peninsula while accelerating preparations for unification internally. While our path for unified Korean peninsula based on universal values and principles may take time, the Republic of Korea government will create sustainable inter-Korean relations that is healthy, mutually beneficial, and on the right track. The ROK government once again reiterates that we are open to inter-Korean dialogue and humanitarian assistance to North Korea. If North Korea genuinely returns to negotiation with their will for denuclearization, will resolve issues that both Koreas confront through dialogue. Dear participants, hopefully this year's KGF in the US will serve as a valuable forum for much needed discussions on the resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue and the promotion of human rights in North Korea. The Ministry of Unification will always keep an open ear to your valuable opinions and like further efforts for international solidarity for our vision for unified Korean peninsula that is free and at peace. I would like to thank you, all of you once again for your participation today and request your continued interest in the Korean peninsula. Thank you for your attention. Very sorry.
Great. Thank you for those wonderful remarks. We're now going to move to the first substantive discussion of the morning, envisioning the future of U.S. policy towards the DPRK. My most recent trip to Seoul several months ago, we had a day to go up to the DMZ, and the objective was to go into one of the tunnels while we were up there. Well, there was a joint ROK U.S. military exercise that was going on at that time, and I don't know, maybe the North Koreans got wind of our delegation as well, and they decided to greet us with rocket fire, and so went the wonderful day we had planned on the DMZ. So I've had to deal with the North Koreans, I guess, indirectly at various points like that over the last year. But on this panel, we're going to explore the future of US-DPRK relations, and I'm pleased to be joined as I move from my right across the group here, Professor Kim Jae-shon, Professor Kim Woo-sung, the Honorable Marshall Billingsley, the Honorable Robert Einhorn, and then as a discussant, Paik-Sok Jun from the Peace and Democracy Institute. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read out the speakers' bios, but please refer to your conference booklet for more information. Each speaker, I'm going to ask to speak for about 10 minutes. The prepared remarks, followed by about 5 minutes or so from the discussant. And then we will open this up to Q&A from the audience. As a reminder for the Q&A, please scan to ask your questions. The QR code you can see here, and the staff will pull together the key questions, pass them up to me, and I will ask the panelists questions. One other item that I thought was interesting, Heather and I were discussing this morning, for those of you who didn't see it, one of the things that I think is important to note about the U.S. ROK cooperation, including in the nuclear realm, was the recent NCG Defense Joint Representative Observers at the ICBM launch. We had South Korean government officials involved in participating at U.S. Vandenberg Air Force Base in California just a few days ago at the ICBM launch. Did not go quite as well as planned, the launch itself, but I think having the delegation visit the Missile Defense Unit was a good example of the cooperation and the alliance's commitment to extended deterrence. So just wanted to highlight that because it was a few days ago. With that, I will turn it over to our first speaker.
Is it me?
It's you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, the Ministry of Unification, Peace and Democracy Institute, and CSIS for putting it all together here today. I know it's not easy. Personally, I feel very honored to be a part of this important venue at this critical juncture in the future of international affairs, world affairs, and also in the future of rules-based international order. So this session is about U.S. policy toward North Korea. So I will talk very briefly about some of the concerns that many people in South Korea have about U.S. policy for North Korea, and my recommendation as to how we should deal with North Korea in the future. So first concern is about the priority of North Korea in the US foreign policy making, whether North Korea is an important agenda in US foreign policy. I mean, this has been a perennial concern in South Korea, but you know, North Korea doesn't really have to be a top priority. You know, North Korea doesn't have to top other agendas in US foreign policy making. But the impression that many people in South Korea have is that North Korea isn't just a front burner issue anymore in US foreign policy. Rather, the US put North Korea, put North Korea on the back burner. And this is particularly true since the Biden administration came into power. Many South Koreans worry whether the US has a political will to resolve North Korea's problems, in which case it's possible for the US can compromise in the future, in the end. And this is all the more true after the outbreak of the Ukrainian war and the outbreak of Israeli-Hamas war. But even before these wars, many in South Korea were sort of under the impression that North Korea was not an important agenda. You know, many South Korean experts come to Washington, D.C. For seminars like this one. And things that we hear from American counterparts, American experts, is that what is South Korea going to do for China problems? What is South Korea going to do for Taiwan? So we tend to think that Taiwan sort of tops North Korea in US foreign policy making. Related to this concern is whether the US has the capability to handle multiple contingencies in the world. Now the US is preoccupied with the war in Ukraine and also a war in the Middle East. So if another war breaks out in Asia or on the Korean Peninsula, to be more precise, will it be possible? Will it be possible for the US to handle that war when the US is preoccupied with two other wars elsewhere? Does US have capability? So the first concern is more about the political will of the United States, and the second concern is about the capability, you know, the capability of the US to handle multiple contingencies in the world. Third, many in South Korea worry about possible domestic political changes in the US. Many South Koreans worry about the 2024 US presidential election and how the outcome could affect the US policy for North Korea. But not just North Korean policy, but alliance policy and others as well. Let me be more upfront here. If Mr. Trump goes back to the White House, we worry whether there is going to be another love letter with Kim Jong-un or another fire and fury against North Korea. Sorry, really, I mean, if there are Trump supporters in the audience, I mean, this is the worry that we have in South Korea. We worry that everything that Yoon Suk-yeol government and the Biden administration have achieved so far could go down the drains. We worry that comprehensive global strategic alliance, Washington Declaration, and whatnot, really, they could all go down the drains. Even Camp David trilateral security cooperation could fall victim here. If you read the spirit of Camp David, you could notice that these three countries took great pains, really great pains to institutionalize the trilateral cooperation. The idea, the rationale, I think, is that if we institutionalize the cooperation can be insulated from domestic political changes to a substantial extent. But I'm not really sure whether institutionalization can be a sufficient condition for sustainability or durability here. And speaking of domestic politics, my concern is not limited to American domestic politics. I worry about South Korea's domestic politics as well. The general election is scheduled in April next year. And how is it going to affect North Korea policy, South Korea's North Korea policy, and ROK-US alliance? And how is it going to affect our relations with Japan? And even in Japan, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if in post-Kishida era. Sure, once again, we'll have to institutionalize the cooperation, but is it really going to be enough? Is it going to be enough to insulate the cooperation from potential domestic political changes in three countries? So these are the concerns that many South Koreans have these days. And now, getting back to North Korea policy, what do we have to do? What does the US have to do, to be more precise? I wish I had the answer, but I don't really. I think it was Dr. Victor Cha who said that North Korea is a land of lousy policy option. So when it comes to North Korea policy, there's no such thing as a good policy. So a policy has to be between bad policy and worse policy. And the worst policy, I think, is to launch preventive wars against North Korea. That's the worst because it's the beginning of the Second Korean War. And the worst policy is to cave into North Korean threats, lifting sanctions and suspending joint military drills in return for resumption of the talk. I think this is worse policy. And then the bad policy option is to stay the course, really. Strengthen defense and deterrence, and make sure sanctions regime stay intact. Not a very attractive option, I know, not very creative one, but if the choice is really between the worse and bad, I think we'll have to choose the bad over worse. Now, North Korea believes that the arrival of the new Cold War in the region works to their advantage because, once again, they have great patrons in China and Russia. And North Korea understands that their strategic value to China and Russia looms larger than before because of the new Cold War. And I don't know, I like this term, blockization of the international order. That's why they became more confident, and I think that's the reason why they became bolder. I think they made a strategic decision to be at the forefront of this new Cold War competition. I think that this strategic calculation will have to change, and in order for this to happen, it's important for liberal countries to prevail in this new Cold War competition. So Russia will have to lose the war in Ukraine. We'll have to sort of roll back China from Taiwan. I'm sorry to use Cold War terminology here. We'll have to roll back China from South China Sea. If that happens, I think North Korea might change their strategic calculations. So until then, we'll have to stay the course. Don't cave into North Korea's threats. Work on basics, strengthen fundamentals, augment our defense and deterrent capabilities. Stay patient. I'll stop here. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Kim. Just note, by the way, that that he was a minute and a half short. So yeah, which was good. We'll take that. Thank you.
Well, I'll use up 1.5 minutes more, so that together it'll be 20 minutes, two of us. First of all, I would like to thank Director Lee Dong-sun and Ministry of National Unification, and also Dr. Seth Jones and CSIS for organizing this lovely conference. It's always very nice to come back to Washington, D.C. I was asked to make comments on envisioning the United States policy toward North Korea after the 2024 presidential election. Dr. Kim Jae-chung already mentioned a lot of points that I wanted to make. But I thought that I was opening the session, so I was thinking of briefly brush up the previous and the current Biden administration's policy toward North Korea, and then suggest the factors that may have impacts on the trustworthy alliance relationship between our two countries. The Obama administration's policy toward North Korea was known as the strategic patience. During the Obama administration, there have been the second, third, fourth, fifth nuclear test by North Korea. But the only measure the Obama administration has taken was a sanction in North Korea with the United Nations Security Council resolutions. The Obama administration at first tried to dialogue with North Korea, demanding North Korea's moratorium of missile and nuclear tests. But it did not work out. The Obama administration announced that rebalancing to Asia and emphasized that it will maintain alliance commitment in the Korean Peninsula despite sweeping defense budget cuts. The Obama administration also wanted to install the THAAD missile defense system in Korea, and September 2016, the first THAAD system was installed in Seongju. The Trump administration criticized the Obama administration's policy toward North Korea and declared that it will carry out the policy of the maximum pressure and engagement until FFVD, final fully verified denuclearization, including the weapons of mass destruction. President Trump indicated that UN Security Council sanctions and United States unilateral sanctions and military options against North Korea's nuclear facilities, all these were on the table. In September 2017, 8 months after he sworn in as president, North Korea carried out the 6th nuclear test. The Trump administration indicated an operation to hunt Kim Jong-un and discussed the possibility of a surgical strike against North Korea. But Pentagon worried about 10 million South Korean people who lived in Seoul metropolitan area as hostages to North Korea, who are very vulnerable to North Korean retaliation. The Trump administration's maximum pressure policy toward North Korea must have led Kim Jong-un regime to come to the negotiation table with the Trump administration. During his term, President Trump met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un 3 times at Singapore on June 2018, at Hanoi on February 2019, and also at Panmunjom on June 2019. Trump, especially at the Hanoi, President Trump argued for the big deal, which meant FFVD in return for lifting the economic sanctions against North Korea. But there was no deal at all. After the Singapore summit in 2018, President Trump agreed with President Moon Jae-in to cancel all the major joint military exercises of the US-DPRK and the Korean military. Those large-scale joint military exercises included Fall Eagle, Ulchi Freedom Guardian, Key Resolve, and Vigilant Ace. President Moon tried to appease Kim Jong-un by canceling all those major joint military exercises, while President Trump complained that they are too costly. The Biden administration came up with a calibrated and practical approach as its policy toward North Korea. During his term, however, Biden administration has not done much dialogues with North Korea, and not so successful in bringing up even the United Nations Security Council resolutions to sanction North Korea because of the China's and also Russia's oppositions. In the meantime, North Korea's nuclear capability and its delivery system have been upgraded, and North Korea declared that it will not give up its nuclear weapons program, and that nuclear weapons could even be used for the preemptive strikes. The Biden administration's policy toward North Korea has been almost like Obama administration's strategic patience. Biden administration has focused on China's challenge in the Indo-Pacific and emphasizes strengthening of the alliance structure to deal with North Korea's nuclear threat against North Korea. Against South Korea, the Biden administration and Yoon Suk-yeol administration agree not only to demonstrate the credibility of the extended deterrence provided by the United States, as demonstrated in the Washington Declaration on April 2023, but also to develop South Korea's missile defense, maximum retaliation capability, and to enhance trilateral cooperation among the ROK, the United States, and Japan. Now, many experts suggest that the Kim Jong-un regime will never give up its nuclear weapons. But both the ROK and the US governments maintain their goal of the North Korea's denuclearization. The Yoon Suk-yeol administration, with its so-called audacious initiative, wants to establish sustainable peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula through complete denuclearization of North Korea. In the pre-negotiation phase, until North Korea sits on the negotiation table, the Yoon administration emphasizes deterrence and dialogue and diplomacy to dissuade North Korea's nuclear development. Although, as many suggest, the North Korea's denuclearization goal is difficult to accomplish in the short run, the Yoon administration will pursue the denuclearization of North Korea with middle to long-term perspectives. To successfully accomplish the goal of the denuclearization of North Korea, the Republic of Korea and the United States need to tightly collaborate and coordinate. To do that, the ROK and the US have to maintain the most credible and trustworthy alliance relationship. But this ROK-US alliance relationship can be affected by the domestic politics variable, that is, leadership change and domestic public opinion support may affect the alliance relationship and its credibility of alliance commitments. The geopolitical variable may also affect the credibility of the alliance commitments. That is, 1.5 years from now, if the protracted Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas conflict are still going on, or Xi Jinping, China, reveals its aggressive intention in the Taiwan Strait, those may create difficult situation for the United States to provide credible extended deterrence to the Republic of Korea. However, the institutional variable and the leadership chemistry variable may have positive impact on the ROK-US alliance relationship. The Washington Declaration and the subsequent nuclear consultative group and the Camp David Trilateral Summit and regular-based trilateral meeting on foreign ministers, defense ministers, and national security advisors will have a positive effect on the stability of the alliance relationship and the credibility of the alliance commitments. We know that ROK needs the extended deterrence. We also know that the United States needs to strengthen its alliance structure to deal with China's challenge. In addition, chemistry between leaders have a positive effect too. Whoever wins the November 2024 presidential election, the presidential term between the Korean president and the American president overlap for some time. If President Biden wins, then President Biden and President Yoon can maintain trustworthy relationship with their current good chemistry until May 2027. If for the former President Trump wins, I expect that the Yoon-Trump chemistry will quickly become as good as the Yoon-Biden chemistry. I believe so. I don't know about you, but I believe so. President Yoon Suk-yeol's leadership style is very different from the former President Moon Jae-in. President Yoon's frank, straightforward, and even audacious leadership style can match very well with President Trump. In case Donald Trump wins the coming election, what we should do is that the two sides should work together to hold the summit meeting as soon as possible. President Yoon has demonstrated his willingness to go together with the trustworthy alliance partners by explicitly saying no status quo change in the South China Sea or in the Taiwan Strait by force, and by expressing support for Ukraine. Whoever wins the election, President Yoon's demonstration of willingness to cooperate with his trustworthy alliance partner on the Indo-Pacific strategy and on the war in Ukraine will be helpful to promote cooperation and coordination between the two countries in dealing with North Korea's nuclear threat. for the mid to long-term period, both the ROK and the United States should not give up the goal of the denuclearization of North Korea. For the short-term period, two allies should keep the credibility of extended deterrence at the highest level, no matter what happens geopolitically, and keep carrying out the regular-based, large-scale joint military exercises, mobilizing the United States strategic weapons systems. And at the same time, making efforts to bring the Kim Jong-un regime to the negotiation table, at least to come up with the moratorium of North Korea's missile and nuclear tests. Finally, the Yoon administration should not only talk to the Biden administration, but keep communication channels open to talk to the supporters of the former President Trump, so that whoever wins the 2024 election, the ROK, make sure that extended deterrence is absolutely credible, the large-scale joint military exercises will be carried out, and dialogues with North Korea are sincerely pursued. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to.
About 12 minutes, right?
It was good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to turn to Marshall. I also want to highlight before turning to Marshall that he was one of the commissioners on the Bilateral Strategic Posture Commission, which recently published a report. So over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Seth, and thanks for having me here. Having been President Trump's Assistant Secretary of the Treasury and later his envoy for arms control, I had the experience of working with the Moon government to ensure that their various efforts to undercut international sanctions on the North Koreans did not advance, and to continually remind them that the United States views our alliance as much broader than narrowly focused on North Korea. But I'm not going to talk about financial and economic matters, though I'd be happy in the question and answer session to do so. Rather, I'm going to go exactly to where Seth just mentioned, which is the views I'm going to express now are the unanimous views of our nation's Strategic Posture Commission, which is comprised of 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans, and which arrived at a consensus set of recommendations, many of which actually directly pertain to both South Korea and North Korea. We view that North Korea continues its twin objectives of perpetuating the Kim regime and the desire to dominate the Korean Peninsula. And in pursuing this, they obviously are emphasizing their long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles tipped by nuclear warheads. In fact, they have missiles of all various ranges. They tested nearly 100 times last year, these various missile systems. They have plutonium warheads. They claim to have highly enriched uranium. We assess that they have a stockpile of a few dozen warheads, and we believe that they may well be preparing to test a new device that has tactical nuclear applications. In response to this, our commission, the 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans together, recommended that we need to address the lack of sufficient theater nuclear weapons, either deployed or based in the Asia-Pacific region, and we set forth the attributes that would be desirable in a new theater system. Now, I view those attributes as being satisfied by a cruise missile, a sea-launched cruise missile, though we did not, as a commission, arrive at a consensus to so name it. We also said that our Indo-Pacific Command needs urgently to learn the ability to plan integrated nuclear and conventional operations, and that we needed to, as a nation, very much emphasize the speedier acquisition of long-range, non-nuclear precision strike systems. Indeed, I started the process at the end of the Trump administration within the State Department to remove the missile technology control regime restrictions on the ROK, and I was very pleased that the Biden administration followed through and did so. That's my own aside. On missile defense, we are very concerned that we maintain the ability to stay ahead of North Korean missile capabilities, and that will require additional ground-based interceptors and next-generation interceptors. But we also view the fact that with Putin's saber-rattling with what may happen with Xi and Taiwan, that our missile defenses now, and again, this is all consensus that I'm reflecting here, must be expanded to protect the United States against coercive strike. Obviously, that expansion in capability will then further redound to our benefit in being able to defend against North Korean attack. Indeed, we said that all domains need to be explored for missile defense. That includes space, and if proven feasible, that we need to pursue deployment of new capabilities with urgency. Finally, I was very pleased that our commission reaffirmed the importance of our alliances and partnerships. Of particular concern, given the neo-isolationism that is creeping into my party, but may be manifest across both ends of the political spectrum. We view that a strong, credible U.S. nuclear arsenal is, in fact, one of the greatest non-proliferation tools that the United States has to assure our allies that they don't need nuclear weapons. And that is a very direct and pointed comment that I'm making to the Republic of Korea. To ensure that you are confident in our extended deterrence, we recommend a number of long overdue modernization efforts, as well as an expansion in our modernization program. What we said is that the current program we plan is absolutely necessary, but it is not sufficient. And so the Commission is recommending that we begin to upload warheads from our hedge, that we ensure that our replacement to the Minuteman III, which wasn't so successful, but that's why we do tests, but that the Sentinel missile that will replace it is deployed with multiple warheads, that we increase the number of B-21 bombers that are procured, as well as their long-range standoff weapon, that we increase the number of Columbia-class submarines that we will pursue, that we examine sort of back to the future in the Cold War sense, that we begin again to look at road mobile ICBMs, and that we move our Air Force to putting our bombers back onto continuous alert. As we said in the report, and I recommend that you all take a look at it, China is no longer and can no longer be considered a lesser included case within the U.S. strategic posture. Indeed, for that very reason, we fully support the Washington Declaration between President Biden and President Yoon. A new nuclear consultative group to strengthen extended deterrence is very welcome and long overdue. And it certainly would be our hope that you take the investments that we believe Congress will make because, again, of the strength of, in this town, such a rare thing to have bipartisan consensus that surrounds the status of our strategic posture and the role of our alliances. Seth, thank you.
Thank you very much. Why don't we move over to Bob?
Seth, thank you very much. I thank CSIS and the Peace and Democracy Institute for organizing this conference. I actually support much of what Marshall said, even some of the ideas he had that didn't achieve a consensus in the commission, like nuclear slickums, for example. But we can go into that. We can go into that later. The rapid advancement of North Korea's nuclear and missile programs obviously pose very significant risks to the United States and South Korea. So how should the allies respond? The Biden administration, like its predecessors, has sought negotiations aimed at denuclearizing North Korea. But unfortunately, Kim Jong-un has rejected repeated Biden administration initiatives to begin the talks. Kim Jong-un doesn't want negotiations to interfere with the completion of his very ambitious nuclear and missile programs that he announced in January of 2021. He fears, I think, that negotiations would get in the way, and so he's rejected them. And clearly, nothing that Kim Jong-un has said or done suggests that he has any interest in getting rid of the nuclear capabilities that he regards as essential to the survival of his regime. Also, like its predecessors, the Biden administration has pursued sanctions and other pressures to squeeze the North Koreans economically, to impede its access to sensitive equipment and technology, and to bring it to the negotiating table. Now, North Korea is under significant pressure, and a more conscientious and comprehensive application of sanctions could further ratchet up that pressure. But pressure won't decisively reduce the North Korean threat. In the current international environment, the U.S. leverage is quite limited. In the past, China and Russia often cooperated with the United States in opposing North Korea's nuclear and missile activities. They voted for very tough UN Security Council sanctions in the 2016-2017 period. But they've now become North Korea's strategic partners. They're ignoring UN resolutions that they once supported. They're helping North Korea evade economic sanctions. They're vetoing additional Security Council sanctions, and they're even blocking condemnations of North Korean violations of existing Security Council resolutions. With Russia desperate for North Korean military assistance for use against Ukraine, Moscow can't be expected to press Pyongyang to rein in its nuclear and missile programs. Indeed, the risk now is that in exchange for North Korea's military assistance, Russia will provide the North critical support for those programs. In their geostrategic competition with the United States, China and Russia seem to have become tolerant of a North Korean nuclear capability that would add to America's strategic challenges. So, with neither negotiations nor pressures likely to reduce the North Korean threat, the main U.S. and South Korean response must be to strengthen their individual and collective deterrent capabilities. The Yoon and Biden administrations have given a high priority to boosting deterrence, and they've made significant progress. At the highest political levels, they've worked together closely to demonstrate strong alliance solidarity and resolve. They've substantially stepped up their joint military exercises and military readiness. The ROK is boosting its own conventional military capabilities, including its counter-strike missile programs. The U.S. has increased the frequency and visibility of its deployments of U.S. strategic assets to the region. Together with Japan, Seoul, and Washington have pursued trilateral defense cooperation in such areas as real-time sharing of missile warning data. In the April Washington Declaration, the United States and ROK took significant steps to strengthen the U.S. extended nuclear deterrent, including by giving South Korea a more prominent role in the planning and execution of that deterrent, agreeing to bilateral crisis consultations on any possible use of nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, and establishing a nuclear consultative group to consider further improvements. But the Yoon administration is not completely satisfied. It believes more can be done to give South Korea greater influence in U.S. extended deterrence policies. But it's encouraged by progress to date, both in enhancing deterrence of North Korea and reassuring the South Korean public of the reliability of the U.S. nuclear umbrella. According to polls, support in the South for an independent nuclear deterrent seems to have somewhat subsided, at least for the time being. Still, many in South Korea in the South Korean public and in the South Korean elite want to keep open the option of an independent ROK nuclear weapons capability. And they're concerned that the 2024 US presidential election could bring back policies that again cast doubt on US security guarantees. While recent efforts by the Allies to boost their deterrent capabilities may have helped to discourage Kim Jong-un from engaging in deliberate aggression, the risk of inadvertent hostilities may actually have grown. The DPRK's deployment of tactical nuclear systems, its policy of nuclear preemption if it believes its leadership is under attack, and its questionable ability to distinguish an Allied missile test or exercise from an Allied attack have significantly increased the risk that misperception, miscalculation, or accident could result in armed conflict escalating to the nuclear level. Engagement with the North, but with a somewhat different objective, may now be advisable, in my opinion. The United States and South Korea could approach the North and propose setting aside denuclearization for the time being and focusing instead on risk reduction, mainly confidence building, transparency, and communications measures that could reduce the likelihood of inadvertent armed conflict. A risk reduction agenda could include pre-notification of agreed categories of missile tests and missile exercises, no-fly and maritime buffer zones, routine and crisis communications channels, rules of the road on cyber activities, and the toning down of inflammatory rhetoric. Some observers may be concerned that engaging with North Korea on risk reduction would amount to accepting Pyongyang as a legitimate nuclear-armed state, something the United States cannot do, should not do, and are not prepared to do. Participants in risk reduction talks, which could be bilateral, trilateral, or multilateral, would therefore need to reaffirm their adherence to the ultimate goal of the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But at the same time, they would emphasize the importance of dealing with today's most immediate threat, the growing risk of inadvertent conflict leading to nuclear war. Of course, Pyongyang's willingness to engage on risk reduction is far from certain. It may believe that maintaining risks at a high level serves its interests by making the United States and its allies more cautious, or it may engage but condition its support for risk reduction measures on unacceptable concessions from the United States and its allies. Still, I think it's worth a try. Risk reduction measures would not remove the need for US and ROK to strengthen deterrence and maintain allied military readiness. But together with continued efforts to reinforce deterrence, they could play a role in reducing current tensions and reducing the threat that the North Koreans pose. And given the current lack of US leverage to achieve the elimination or even a significant reduction of North Korea's nuclear capabilities, that would be a substantial security gain and probably the best that could be done under present circumstances. I'll conclude there.
Thank you very much. And as with all of the comments, we'll have an opportunity to get into more detailed discussion on them as we get to the Q&A. But let me turn this over for our discussant part. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. It is my great honor to have an opportunity to speak with these distinguished speakers. I believe that Professor Jae-Cheon Kim and Woo-Sang Kim nicely laid out a very useful discussion point at the very beginning of this session. And admittedly, many South Koreans worry about US government's alleged low interest or low capability in resolving nuclear North Korea. And I think there's some difference between containing nuclear North Korea and completely resolving the North Korean nuclear weapons. And I think for the first one, containing North Korea, the United States has been doing a very great job due to its dominant nuclear power. And I think United States will still continue to do a very good job in containing North Korea because, and US extended deterrence, at least. People like me, IR realists, believe that US extended deterrence is quite effective. But what about completely resolving the North Korean nuclear issues? So I would like to ask Honorable Billingsley and Einhorn, because you are an expert who are familiar with the two US presidents, former President Donald Trump and the current President Biden. Do you have, how do you think the United administration after the 2024 election would or should address South Koreans' concerns about alleged low interest and low capability for the United States in dealing with resolving the North Korean nuclear issues? And my question to Professor Woo-Sang Kim and Jae-Chun Kim will be to collaborate with the United States against nuclear North Korea in the post-2024 election landscape. What specific aspects of the United States and ROK alliance should be emphasized? And my last point is at the later part of Honorable Einhorn's speech, you talked about risk reduction agenda. And it sounds to me like typical arms control measures and to mitigate the crisis stability in Korean Peninsula. And depending on the results of 2024 election, will there be any chance that the United States government will engage in de jure or de facto arms control talk with North Korea? And if so, how would the United States government sell this idea to its allies, including South Korea and Japan, which may not be very receptive to the notion of arms control with North Korea? And I believe that my last question, any of our speakers in this session can chime in because you all have an expertise in international security. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to give our speakers a chance to answer those great questions. But let me first direct to our American panelists that are discussing this question about the U.S. And the credibility issue. I mean, having been in Seoul earlier this year, there are certainly questions about the U.S.'s ability to focus on multiple conflicts and areas at the same time. Up until 2 or 3 weeks ago, it looked like it was primarily Russia, Ukraine, and the Taiwan Straits in addition to North Korea. That has now been added to broader Middle East concerns. Anybody that's flagged the Secretary of State's trip over the weekend also highlights that this is much bigger than just Israel-Gaza. He's been in Jordan, he's been in Iraq, he's been in the Gulf, concerns about a broadening, widening of the conflict. That might include Lebanon and Syria as well. So with all of these things going on in the world, what is your sense about the U.S.'s ability to strengthen extended deterrence and to convince the Koreans that it has the ability to manage all of these and also stay focused on the Korean Peninsula?
Okay, to to Seth's question, and this has been raised, I think Jay Sean also raised this question of capacity. How many balls can we juggle in the air at one time? I don't think it's really, for the Biden administration and Korea, I really don't think it's a question of capacity. I think as the Biden administration has looked at North Korea, it's asked itself, what's the likelihood of success here? What's the payoff? It's tried. It's made repeated efforts to get talks underway, but it's been rejected every time. So I think it's concluded that the best thing it could do for peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula is to strengthen extended deterrence. I think that that's been the focus, and there's been no small priority given to extended deterrence. I've been in touch with the White House and the Pentagon folks who've done this, and this has taken a lot of time working bilaterally with the Yoon administration to strengthen extended deterrence. The state visit by President Yoon in April, this was not a low priority matter. This was a big deal, and showed the importance that the Biden administration placed on strengthening alliances. So, in terms of priority to negotiations, it's tried, but, it takes two to tango, and the North Koreans not interested. In terms of strengthening the deterrent, I think that's been a very high priority for this administration.
I would echo that. I would also say that the difference between the Yoon administration and the Moon administration is night and day. The Moon government gave the United States the repeated sense that they viewed the alliance as only relevant to the North Korean threat. When we continually stressed to South Korea the fact that a rising nuclear arms racing China, who has territorial disputes with, they even have a territorial dispute over the EEZ with North Korea. So you've got a revisionist power aligned with a Russian power who are seeking to upend the US-led rules-based order to impose their own version of rules-based orders. And we need South Korea to be with us in that contest. President Yoon has gone out of his way to address that and to demonstrate that South Korea can, in some respects, be counted on in this coming crisis with Xi Jinping. And I think the more tangible contributions that South Korea makes with respect to China, the stronger the relationship will become.
I want to give our Korean panelists a chance to either respond to that or answer any of the questions that our discussant put up.
If Biden administration keep going, then I think that the most important thing is the policy priority about North Korea's nuclear issue. As long as there are many geopolitical threats going on, then how we maintain policy priority, as a North Korean issue as a top of policy priority, I think is very important. Institutions there, right? We have NCG going on, extended deterrence provided, but if President Trump wins the election, then, as I've mentioned, that even though there are institutions, chemistry between the two leaders are going to be very important. So we maintain communication channel and especially utilize private talks with the support group of President Trump so that we can quickly set up our chemistry, I mean, if you look at Trump with Kim Jong-un, when their chemistry went, good, they cooperate together. When they didn't go good, they had a trouble, right? Fire and fury, whatever. So I think we have to work very hard to quickly set up the, meetings between President Yoon and President Trump.
So, yeah, so Dr. Beck, your question was how can South Korea collaborate with the United States after 2024 US presidential election? And I think you are assuming the scenario in which Mr. Donald Trump goes back to the White House. I just hope that the second Trump administration would be different, that he would come to the realization that breakthrough is not likely because North Korea's adamant attitude that the reason they became bolder and more confident had to do with the structural changes. I mean, with the arrival of the new Cold War international order in the region. So it's highly unlikely for North Korea to change. So maybe one good news is that Mr. Trump's eyes are more on Vladimir Putin. He wants to cut a deal with Mr. Putin instead of Kim Jong-un because he didn't really have a good experience with Mr. Kim in Hanoi. Maybe the best the U.S. can do is to propose a talk that Secretary Einhorn just proposed. I mean, the talk in which we can really talk about risk reduction measures with North Koreans. But I am a little bit skeptical of that prospect because North Korea has been very adamant about not having that kind of talk. The kind of talk that they want is nuclear arms reduction talk. We are two equals, we are two equal nuclear weapons countries, and the only difference is you have more warheads than we do. So we get rid of one nuclear warhead, then in return you get rid of like 10 nuclear warheads. That's the kind of arms reduction talk that North Koreans want with the Americans. So that, I mean, sure that we'll have to establish a guardrail, between the two countries. I mean, establish a hotline that has been severed for many, many years. But that said, I'm not really sure whether North Korea will come to that kind of arms risk management talk. I think another thing that I'd like to emphasize that the U.S. really has to put in good faith efforts to do a message management. I mean, the kind of message that the U.S. could impart to the allies, to South Korea when the U.S. proposed that kind of talk to North Koreans. Because many South Koreans, as I said during my presentation, worry that the U.S. could compromise, which means that the U.S. might actually recognize North Korea as de facto nuclear weapons countries by proposing that kind of talk. So one thing I'd like to recommend is that the U.S. will really have to do the message management when you propose that kind of talk to North Koreans. Thank you.
Thank you. You had a question, I think, for Mr. Einhorn as well. One of your last questions. I don't know if you wanted to.
Arms control, how to sell the idea of practical arms control to U.S. allies in East Asia.
I recognize there may be some difficulty if our allies, if the South Koreans and the Japanese assume what this means is that we've given up, we've thrown in the towel on denuclearization, and we're going to accept an arms control framework. North Korea is not a nuclear peer. We're debating whether China is becoming a nuclear peer. North Korea is not a nuclear peer. We're not prepared to engage in traditional arms control talks of the kind that we used to engage in with the Soviet Union and Russia, where they reduce and we reduce and so forth. That's not the idea. What I'm talking about risk reduction, I'm talking about reciprocal obligations. In other words, they would pre-notify missile test exercise. The US-ROK alliance would also make that pre-notification. It's kind of reciprocal. We wouldn't, in that, pay North Korea for, serious risk reduction measures. We wouldn't, we wouldn't provide sanctions relief for that. They're getting the benefit of having knowledge about what our alliance is doing. We have the benefit of knowing what they're doing with their program. It's a reciprocal kind of thing. I think we would have to make clear to our allies that we're not giving up on denuclearization, but denuclearization is a long-term proposition. Is denuclearization dead forever? This is a question people raise. I don't know. I think there are only two conditions under which we can imagine the elimination of the North Korean nuclear capability. One is the complete transformation of the values and priorities of this Kim regime. I don't see that happening anytime soon. The other is the collapse of this regime. I think that is certainly more likely than the first condition, but it's not predictable. We can't, I don't think today we can apply sufficient pressure to cause that collapse. But will it happen? Did we predict the collapse of the Soviet Union? No, we didn't do that. It may collapse one day. We can't predict when, but these are the only conditions which I can imagine the complete denuclearization of North Korea. I think the U.S. has to be frank with its allies about this and say denuclearization is long-term. Risk reduction is immediate because there is currently a real risk, in my view, that we could stumble into some kind of armed conflict that could very quickly escalate to the nuclear level. So let's deal with the immediate now. Would the North Koreans be interested? Who knows? I mentioned one of, they may like having a high level of risk. They may negotiate with us and propose totally unacceptable conditions. Well, we can reject those. It may not work, but I think it's worth a try.
And then I've got a question for Marshall after that.
So I agree with Dr. Kim Jo-chun's. The risk reduction idea may send the wrong messages. To do that, as you just mentioned, I think that both governments have to declare that our goal is the denuclearization of North Korea. For the midterm to long term, we are going to go for that. But at this moment, we'll do risk reduction. But that does not necessarily sending a message to North Korea that the North Korea's ICBM test or missile test, nuclear test, are acceptable. We may send the wrong message. You say, okay, we let you know that we are going to do this missile test, and you let us know when you do a nuclear test. That may send the wrong message to North Korea. So that's we have to be very careful. Another question that I would like to ask to you is that the two leaders have already said that if North Korea uses nuclear weapons preemptively, then the Kim Jong-un regime will be gone, right? But I agree with you that we have, even South Korean government has state-of-the-art conventional weapons. We are developing those, and those weapons could be enough to retaliate North Korea. But that may send the wrong message to not just North Korea, but to Russia and China as well. Even if North Korea use nuclear weapons, we may not use nuclear weapons. We have conventional weapons to deal with, sending a message that we don't use nuclear weapons. No, you use nuclear weapons, we don't respond with nuclear weapons. We only, we have plenty of strategic, state-of-the-art conventional weapons, so we are going to use that one. I think that may also send the wrong message to North Korea or to Russia.
Well, I agree, and that certainly should never be a message that's conveyed. In fact, for that very reason, we redesigned our submarine-launched ballistic missile warhead to dial it down to a low-yield option. It's also why we pushed very hard and did secure agreement at the Posture Commission level for the introduction, either basing or deployment, of theater nuclear capabilities in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, in my personal view, a sea-launched cruise missile, like we used to have, provides a very threatening deterrent capability against Kim Jong-un. Let's just remember, at the end of the day, what we learned during the Cold War, and which still holds true today, is that deterrence of dictators has to revolve around three things. First, the ability to hold the dictator personally at risk. Secondly, to hold at risk the apparatus that keeps him in place. And thirdly, to be able to destroy the military war machine upon which all of these dictatorships depend. We have that capacity today. We certainly showed Kim Jong-un that we have that ability with conventional solutions as well. But the deterrent capability of the United States is the backbone of the extended alliance relationship that we have with South Korea, and there should be never any doubt about that.
Two quick comments, and then a question for the panel. First of all, just to highlight on the election issue, we're still a year away from elections in the United States. As the history of our elections in this country shows, a lot can happen in 1 year. We had a huge wild card in the final year of the last election, which was COVID, that had an implication on the elections. We've got two leading candidates in their 70s and 80s. So I would just say there are other people running as well. So I wouldn't count anybody out at this point, even with the polls where they are today. We have a lot of questions, which I think is a good indication of the topic of this panel and the panelists. I hope we get to all of them. I don't know that we will, but I will get to as many as possible, but we've got a lot of good questions. One that I wanted to start off with, and this gets, Marshall, to your comment here, but a lot of people have weighed in on it. And I'm going to go back to the historical debates on the offense-defense balance. The ability to strengthen deterrence. To what degree, if you're looking at this from the North Korean side, to what degree does this also risk the possibility of escalation? I mean, how, with strengthened capabilities, both nuclear and conventional, are there worries, or how do you mitigate worries about escalation? The North Koreans seeing this as offensive or provocative. How do you weigh the costs and benefits, or at least the way it's communicated? And then I'm going to open it up after you're done to anybody else that wants to weigh in on this.
I think it was Harold Brown, one of our lab directors, once said, "We build, they build, we stop, they build." So I would not at all accept that the enhancement of our deterrent capabilities, which are a deterrent capability, in any way it can be ascribed as justifying or provocative from the North Korean standpoint. Moreover, the North Koreans brandish their nuclear saber and their missile forces to get attention. And the less attention we pay to them, obviously, it doesn't sit well with them. They are very much looking for the limelight. That's why I do worry a little bit about some of these risk reduction measures, to the sense that we then feed that process. We should be quite careful. No, I think our not just our improvement of capability, but the introduction of new capability into the region and into Korea are precisely the kinds of things we need to do to keep the North Korean regime guessing.
So on this question, I want to focus on missile defense, and especially homeland missile defense. One of the main reasons that the North Koreans have been so intent on developing the capability with its ICBMs to strike the American homeland is because their hope is that if we see our homeland vulnerable, we won't come to the defense of our Northeast Asian allies. We won't trade Seattle for Seoul or something like that. And, this is a real concern to our South Korean allies, the vulnerability to North Korean ICBMs. Look, eventually, North Korea will develop the capability to overwhelm U.S. defenses. I believe that's inevitable to penetrate those defenses. It's a kind of numbers game, at least with current technologies. I think it's in the interests of the United States and its allies for the U.S. to stay ahead of North Korea's threatening ICBM capabilities as long as we can, if we can do so at an affordable cost. So I wouldn't give up on that. I would continue to strengthen homeland defenses now, look at other technologies where maybe the cost-benefit ratio is a little better than the current generation of interceptors, and to do that as much as possible, because that's going to strengthen extended deterrence and the confidence of our allies.
Together with missile defense system against fledgling North Korea's nuclear capability, what about, very difficult, should I say this? What about providing nuclear latency capability to Korea to send a strong message to North Korea?
Woo-Sang, I was afraid you were going to raise that question. So during the Obama administration, one of my responsibilities was to negotiate with the South Koreans on renewal of the US-ROK civil nuclear agreement. And at the time, the South Koreans were very insistent on pursuing, for civil nuclear energy reasons, I truly believe, both a reprocessing capability, they called it pyroprocessing, as well as a uranium enrichment capability. The rationale was never, we want these for strategic reasons, we want these to have a latent nuclear weapons capability. No, it was, no, these served legitimate civil nuclear energy goals. We responded with similar civil nuclear energy reasons why this was not a very cost-effective way for South Korea to pursue its civil nuclear energy objectives. And so we decided to kick the can down the road with a 10-year fuel cycle study that I think is in its 12th or 13th year at this point. But the U.S. has been reluctant to give its blessing to a South Korean fuel cycle capability, which would give it a latent nuclear weapons capability. I'm pretty sure that the Biden administration will continue to take that view. A future Republican administration after 2025, I don't know what the view would be. I hope it would also be fairly negative, and that the main thrust of U.S. effort would be to strengthen that extended deterrent as much as possible.
Yeah, I don't have, I think, any doubt that a future Republican administration would have exactly the same view. Indeed, we took the view, we went even further to advise the Moon administration that we did not see a need for nuclear-powered submarines. One has to keep in mind that this latency concept threatens the complete unraveling of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. There are plenty of other governments, for instance, I personally oppose the idea of reprocessing in Saudi Arabia. There are plenty of other countries that are also concerned with facing nuclear adversaries who, if this latency concept were to advance, could quickly get out of hand.
But President Trump, when he was in office, he, I don't know, he made a joke or not, but he said, well, even the USFK can be withdrawn, and Korea and Japan may go nuclear. He has said that, right? Please.
I should note to channel my inner realist element too. Some would argue that nuclear weapons are actually quite stabilizing. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's right, but I'm opening up to you for comments. This has been quite a useful discussion.
Okay, you know, we all know that deterrence is a function of capability and political will, right? And also it's a function of perception. Our adversaries will have to perceive that, you know, deterror has the absolute capability and political will to use those capabilities. In case of extended deterrence, I think a beneficiary of extended deterrence, in case of ROK-US alliance, you know, extended deterrence, South Koreans will have to perceive that the U.S. Has the absolute capabilities and also will to use those capabilities. South Koreans do believe that Americans have absolute capabilities, but South Koreans wonder whether the U.S. has will to use those capabilities. To be more precise, whether the U.S. Will be using nuclear weapons when you know, push comes to the shove. So I think it's the inherent limitation of extended deterrence. I mean, I think it's not fair to Americans because Americans have really put in good faith efforts to strengthen extended deterrence. Washington Declaration, issuing NCG and you know, deployment of SSBN for longer duration and more frequently. It strengthened extended deterrence, that's for sure. But the perception of South Koreans is not ours, after all. You know, the U.S. is our most trusted alliance partner, that's for sure. But you know, that deterrent capability is not ours. I think that's the reason why many South Korean experts, growing number of South Korean experts, are talking about nuclear latency. But it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not really nuclear latency. It's more about South Korea's right to use atomic energy for peaceful purposes within the framework NPT. You know, there is a perception in South Korea when Japan is allowed to enrich uranium at the level of 20% without the permission of Americans. And going above 20%, when Japan have a consultation with Americans, they can enrich uranium above the level of 20%. South Koreans, 20%, you know, it's not allowed. I mean, we'll have to go through this meticulous consultation process with Americans, and it's not being perceived fair, you know, to many South Koreans. And it doesn't really bode well for the future of ROK-US alliance, particularly when two leaders last time when they met in Washington, D.C., declared that this ROK-US alliance is going to be more of a nuclear-based alliance. And if you read the spirit of Camp David, I mean, they went really great length to talk about trilateral atomic cooperation between the three countries. I think South Koreans having more of a right to enrich uranium at the level of Japan. That makes perfect sense. I mean, even in South Korea, there is this perception if there is a hierarchy in this, amongst these three countries, it's in descending order the U.S., Japan, and South Korea, because Japan has more of a right to have the latency. I don't know, that's not the right term, by the way. So I think for the future of trilateral cooperation, to elicit more of popular consent for trilateral cooperation from South Koreans, I think it is very important for the U.S. Work harder to leave this impression that at least Japan, South Korea is as equal as Japan amongst these trilateral cooperation. So there are many advantages that come with South Korea having more of a right to use peaceful use of atomic energy. But so we will declare that we will be using this enhanced latency, of course it's not the right term, for peaceful purpose, but we won't be denying that when things go south, when things go wrong, then we reserve to use this right for military purposes. We're not going to deny that, but I mean, think about it. I mean, now China doesn't really hide, make a secret that they want to become a nuclear weapons country, maybe stronger than is the United States, and it's in North Korea's constitution to use nuclear weapons for preemptive purpose. I mean, so 10 years down the road, do you honestly believe that Washington Declaration NCG will do. I think South Korea being more nuclear latent will be much helpful for the U.S. strategy to Northeast Asia. So there are many, advantages that can come with South Korea having more of a right to use atomic power for peaceful purposes.
Can I ask our Korean panelists a follow-up question along these lines, particularly on extended deterrence? Just in addition, what other factors have contributed, and I've watched the polling kind of vary over time, but what factors have contributed to Korean perceptions of U.S. deterrent capabilities and interest in continuing interest in extended deterrence? For example, how much have Koreans watched the withdrawal from Afghanistan or the debates about continuing assistance to Ukraine? And then even on the latency, how much has AUKUS actually figured into that with the nuclear-powered submarine? So curious what your sense is, both on what factors does the Korean population look at as it thinks about this issue, and then on latency, just to add to what degree AUKUS has shaped that.
I think Dr. Kim Jae-chun have already talked about, answered to your question. Okay. So I have nothing much to say. Yeah.
It's just the perception that it's not really fair when we are doing everything right, and particularly this Yoon Suk-yeol government. I mean, if it's happening, because Moon Jae-in government, President Moon was walking on this tightrope. I mean, was trying to split the differences between Americans and Chinese. So for Americans, Americans not giving nuclear engine submarine to South Korea when Americans gave it to Aussies wasn't really, it made sense because Moon Jae-in wasn't really enthusiastic about ROK-US alliance. But, Yoon Suk-yeol government made it very clear that, South Korea will be with the Americans in this new Cold War competition, and not having that latency, more rights to use atomic energy for peaceful purposes, it can be viewed as being unfair to many South Koreans, in which case, it doesn't really bode well for the future of ROK-US alliance, I guess.
I guess among
So you did have something. You did.
have the same answer. Among ordinary citizens, it's different from among, I guess, experts or specialists on these international security issues. I think one of the reasons, they are speculating that one of the reasons why U.S. is reluctant to provide, say, the right of nuclear latency, for example, or having nuclear-powered submarine is because South Korea's policy toward North Korean issues or any security-related issues are not bipartisan compared to Australia and Japan. Go ahead.
One problem I see with President Yoon Suk-yeol is that he goes abroad, he becomes immensely popular. He's very popular amongst American experts, and sometimes American experts tell me, what can we do to help Yoon Suk-yeol? He needs some help. He can use some help because, when he goes back to Korea, his approval rate plummets, really. On a good day, it goes up to 35%. On a bad day, it goes below 30%. So the next general election, which is scheduled in April next year, the prospect is pretty grim. It's pretty gloomy. You don't really have to like Yoon Suk-yeol, but it's very important for Yoon Suk-yeol to succeed. So give him some help. Maybe one way to help him is to give more of a latency, or promise that South Koreans would get, nuclear engine submarine. That could help. That could boost his popularity domestically. So, yeah, that's what I think. I mean, it's important for Yoon Suk-yeol to succeed.
So a couple of issues on AUKUS and latency for Australia. The AUKUS nuclear submarine deal does not give Australia nuclear weapons latency. Yes, there's a highly enriched uranium is going to fuel the reactors on these boats, but the Australians will have no access to that highly enriched uranium. The Australians would commit not to engage in enrichment domestically as long as this AUKUS deal was going forward. But it's going to go forward for decades, if not generations. So it does not provide Australia any leg up on having nuclear weapons. That's, okay. Now, what about South Korea? Marshall mentioned that the Trump administration was kind of negative on helping the South Koreans with nuclear-powered submarines, and I support that in general. But from a non-proliferation perspective, I don't think South Korea having the same deal that Australia get would be a big proliferation risk if South Korea adopted the same approach as has been adopted in AUKUS, which is to say, the nuclear reactor compartments being welded into the submarine, no access, and if South Korea would say that for as long as this deal was in effect, it would not itself engage in enrichment, I think that would be a non-proliferation plus. So I've never been a big opponent of South Korea having nuclear-powered submarine. The issue for South Korea and for the alliance is this the best use of South Korea's defense resources? Wouldn't it be better continuing with its diesel-powered submarines? Aren't these effective enough? And wouldn't South Korea better devote its resources to strengthen the collective US-ROK deterrent in other ways? And probably that's the case. But in terms of non-proliferation, I don't think it would be a big risk. Now, when I was negotiating with the South Koreans on the civil nuclear deal, constantly the South Korean side would throw at me, well, you gave it to Japan. How come we can't do it also? That was a hard issue to resolve. We gave it to Japan in 1988 before we were terribly concerned about the proliferation of fuel cycle capabilities. That wasn't a big deal at the time. And Japan was already reprocessing at the time. Different with South Korea. South Korea was saying, can we get into the reprocessing business? Japan was already in the reprocessing business, and it was hard to say no. In terms of their enrichment program, yes, the US-Japan deal says you can go up to 20%. The reality is Japan has enriched, they developed enrichment technology. They have not pursued enrichment because they were only interested in its commercial value. And they could not produce centrifuge machines that could compete commercially with this European consortium, with France, with Russia, with the United States. So they basically, yes, they have the technology. They haven't even pursued it because they weren't as good at it as they originally thought they would be. So the Japan model shouldn't be used by South Korea saying, why can't we get what reprocessing? Japan has wanted to have a big commercial reprocessing facility at Rokasho. They started this 20 years ago. They haven't brought it online yet because of all the problems it had. They've spent billions and billions of dollars trying to get this technology online. They haven't succeeded. They're hoping to do it now. But this is not a model that South Korea should try to emulate.
Thanks. We have a couple of questions still. One of them is to our Korean panelists. Both ROK and Taiwan are going to have significant elections next year, with the Taiwanese elections in January, and frankly, likely, if the polls hold, for DPP victory. What would ultimately be ROK's Taiwan strategy, and how would that impact this discussion? The question is, what would be South Korea's Taiwan strategy, depending on the outcome of the elections, and would that impact this broader discussion we're having?
I think it's not whoever wins the Taiwan election. It's American policy toward Taiwan. Okay? When China decided to have aggressive act of behavior, act there in Taiwan Straits, then how's Korea respond to that? The administration already said that we do not want to see status quo change in the Taiwan Straits by force. So that's sort of sending a message that we are willing to cooperate with the United States when something happens in the Taiwan Straits. If Kuomintang wins, maybe a little bit better, because Kuomintang has a favorable policy toward China. But even if Minjin-dang wins, I think it won't make that much difference.
Yeah, I think a growing number of South Koreans believe that contingencies over Taiwan Strait and contingencies on the Korean Peninsula, they are closely linked to each other, because contingencies on the Taiwan Strait could create open windows of opportunity for Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un does understand that one thing that Americans hate the most is dealing with two MRC, particularly in Asia. So, I mean, it's official in their document that if Americans get militarily involved in Taiwan Strait contingency, they declared in this official document. If you take a look at this Foreign Affairs article, that came out early this year. North Korea is an asset for China. North Koreans declared that they would get involved if Americans get involved over Taiwan Strait contingencies. So I think a growing number of South Koreans do believe that we cannot just stay away from Taiwan Strait contingencies. We will have to get involved one way or another. I think as to how, two countries, government officials are consulting with each other as to how South Korea could come to the rescue, not to the rescue, but provide some help to Americans over Taiwan Strait. That said, I think Taiwan issue is still a political hard sell in South Korea. So my sort of advice to American friends is not to really push too hard on Taiwan or on China issue as well. I think Americans will have to let South Korea go at its own pace with regard to China policy and Taiwan policy. We'll do something. What? I don't know for sure. But China, and there is no possibility for South Korea to join Team China ever, particularly this administration. So don't put too much pressure.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, on the government. It's not really. It doesn't really come. Work to his advantage when the election, takes place in April next year. And one more thing about latency. I mean, think about it. I mean, South Korea is world's fifth user of enriched uranium and has been an exemplary user of atomic energy for peaceful purposes. But still, South Korea imports natural uranium and entrusts enrichment to other countries. It's just not natural. So just because Americans have this concern that South Korea's uranium enrichment can be converted into military purposes, and we are barred from enriching uranium within the framework of NPT. It's just the perception that it's not just fair to many South Koreans. Thank you.
And if I add to your question,
Yes, and then I'm going to give these two a chance if they want to respond.
it's not the result of Taiwan election. I think the more important thing is the result of Korean election in April 2024.
Yes.
Yeah, unless the ruling party wins, it will be very difficult for the administration to carry out whatever policy they are pursuing.
Yes, I was just reading the question we got, but it is on the Taiwan election. I would expect everything, having just been there to visit President Tsai, they're expecting the Chinese to respond, particularly if it's a DPP, it's a William Lai victory, which may escalate tensions in the region. But I wanted to see if either of you wanted to respond to any of what's been said, and then we've got a few more questions.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of additional capabilities that I think the United States would like to see South Korea acquire. And given that resources are finite, these spending decisions have to be balanced against each other. But it would seem to me that additional theater high altitude air defense capability with interceptors, not just radars, and additional missile defense capabilities are probably, something that a great deal of investment should be made in. I think we've seen in recent days with Hamas's rocket attacks against Israel, with the Houthis shooting long-range cruise missiles, the importance of the ability to intercept and to shield civilian populations is vital. It's a huge problem in the case of Seoul. How you would try to defend a population that's within artillery range. But those are the kinds of investments that I think we probably would like to see made. Burden sharing is always going to be on the table with every American administration. And so that will be something that we have to continue to examine. I mentioned the fact that the Biden administration followed through on what I initiated at the State Department, which was the removal of the limitations on missiles. And so my hope would be that South Korea will, in fact, develop and field a wide range of conventional ballistic and cruise missile and hypersonic tipped capabilities that will be obviously useful in a North Korea contingency, but also can be provided or used in event of a Taiwan crisis.
And interesting on some of these issues, including hypersonics, the major aspect of AUKUS that people often forget about is the Pillar 2, which is the technology transfers between the states. We have a question that I want to turn to our Korean panelists. It's directed to them on the implications of unification. So how do these discussions right now on strengthening deterrence against the North Korean threat, how do they impact the unification discussions of Korea? Is it becoming more difficult to actually envision unification as the sides are now strengthening against each other? What are the broader implications on unification of what we're talking about?
If you look at the public opinion results, more and more young people start to think that we may not need unification, or we may not successfully carry out the unification policies. No matter what, it is true or not, I think we have to go through public education so that we need the unification. Otherwise, if we do not make an effort through public education, then at some point, we may have a hard time talking about the unification unless North Korea voluntarily, gives up nuclear weapons or whatever. So I think public education to emphasize the importance of unification at some point, I think is very important.
Yeah, sure. Support for unification is dwindling in South Korea, and talking about unification abroad is a little bit out of the blue. But that's all the more reason why we have to talk more about unification, to mobilize domestic popular support and support from overseas as well. I mean, to pursue unification is our constitutional duty. Not doing so is unconstitutional, actually. It's like a secession is unconstitutional in the United States. So not pursuing constitution is unconstitutional in South Korea. So you have to understand that. I mean, we need a new vision for unification, because this vision for unification that came out some 30 years ago was based on, like, we have been one nation, one country, so it's just a right thing to do to unify two Koreas, because we are, after all, one nation country. But that sounds a little bit hollow when there is like some 20,000 foreign-borns living in South Korea. So our vision is a little bit more inclusive. Our vision is about Koreans who will be living in unified Korea will have more of a cosmopolitan, citizen, kind of outlook. So that's the new vision. I mean, no matter, we all know that inter-Korean relations are at the lowest point. So no matter what we suggest, I mean, any unification plan that can be acceptable to North Korea, North Korean leaders regime would reject those proposals. So our new unification initiative that the Ministry of Unification has been working on since the beginning of this year has been more about, it's a heavier on vision, but rather light on processes. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
I think we've got time for one last question to our American colleagues on the panel, and that is future wildcard scenarios. We've talked about elections here, but if we can push that aside, I mean, maybe you want to weigh in on that, but setting aside what happens in elections, whether it's in the U.S. or Korea or elsewhere, what other issues could significantly impact these discussions on whether it's Korean latency or whether it's the deterrence question, extended deterrence? What factors do you worry about could significantly impact in one way or the other, whether it's a North Korean nuclear test or something else, a war in the Pacific or elsewhere? What factors do you consider big wild cards that might, as we look over the next 2 to 3 years, might significantly change these the issues we've talked about?
Well, I think as we've discussed, elections are the easiest of the wild cards to envisage now. But beyond that, one could imagine big ramping up of North Korean capabilities. I think, further nuclear testing, demonstration of a realistic ICBM test. So far, the North Koreans have only conducted these lofted trajectories. There's no indication that they've mastered re-entry technology. They don't have a realistic ICBM capability to strike the American homeland, but they could develop that, and I think that would be a big shock, as would further nuclear testing. You can imagine one reason they would conduct a 7th and 8th and 9th test would be to demonstrate the miniaturization of their nuclear device. That could be used for tactical nuclear weapons, as Marshall said. It could also be used for multiple warheads for ICBMs. You need a smaller, more powerful nuclear device to have a MIRV capability. So I think one wild card would be a big jump in North Korean capability. Another would be a big decline in U.S. credibility in terms of meeting its overseas security commitments. I mean, there are going to be a number of opportunities for the U.S. either to demonstrate or not to demonstrate the credibility, whether it's in supporting Ukraine or its attitude toward negotiations in Ukraine or in the Middle East today. So there are a number of opportunities, or dealing with South China Sea contingencies, there are a variety of things. So I think another wild card would be either a dramatic increase in the reliability of the U.S. security guarantee or a dramatic decrease in that credibility.
Marshall, you get the last word. I would also note, in response to your North Korean capabilities too, one of the issues we've been monitoring here, including some of the work that Victor Cha has done, has been Russian technological support to the North Korean program.
Yeah, and Bob alluded to that earlier, and I completely agree. When the North Koreans are supplying 1 million rounds of ammunition to the Russians, they're not just doing it out of the goodness of Kim Jong-un's heart. So what is he getting in exchange from the Russians? And whatever that winds up being, or whatever many things that could be included wind up being, do have the potential to be significant wild cards. I also agree that that it is important that every American administration continue to reinforce the fact that we will support our treaty partners, our treaty allies. We obviously don't have that obligation with Ukraine, and yet you've seen on a bipartisan basis what we have been able to do with congressional Republican leadership, and in some cases a fairly reluctant Biden administration when it comes to many of the capabilities that we ultimately wind up providing. But when it comes to treaty allies, there should be no diminution in the sense of resolve that the United States provides to stand by and to come to the defense of the Republic of Korea.
Great. We are 2 minutes over time, but if you can please join me in thanking a fantastic panel. And I apologize if I didn't get to your question. I think it's one good sign of a vibrant discussion that it didn't quite get to every question on here. But thank you for those that asked a long list of questions. So the next phase of this is food. So it is out here. So we encourage everyone to go out into this beautiful lobby area for lunch. And then we will meet back here at 1320. That is 120 for those non-military folks in the room. Thanks again for your great participation, and thanks again to a fantastic session. Appreciate it.